The people that you see on my screen had reached the pinnacle of business success. Success that was unfortunately short lived because of sudden death. People like Josh Pack, who was the co CEO of Fortress Investments, he was only 51 when he passed away recently. People like Rohan Mirchandani, he was the co founder of Epigamia, disrupting India's dairy market. He died earlier this year, aged only 42. And people like Pankuri Srivastava, she was a Sequoia back founder, dying at only 32. And outwardly, they all looked fine, they all seemed fine. But inside, their systems were quietly collapsing. Their stress hormones were elevated, their arteries might have been inflamed, and their sleep was probably fractured. And most people don't die from a sudden failure, they died from an unmeasured decline. Your blood work might look normal, but it's telling the wrong story. And here's the thing, you track your business KPIs, you track revenue, your investments, but when it comes to your health, most men track nothing. And that's where everything changes. Because when you can measure your health like a system, you can finally manage it like one. And in this video, I'm going to go through the 3 tests that reveal how healthy you really are, and the data that tells you if you're thriving or quietly degrading. And moreover, we're looking at these 5 pillars. We're going to be looking at a framework that looks at precision optimization, which looks around medical diagnostics, your sleep architecture, the best nutrition program, how to train, and finally looking at cognitive health. And just like business, what you don't track will eventually catch up with you. So this is a DEXA scan. Most men think fat is fat, and the truth is it's not. There's one kind of fat that kills faster, and that's called visceral fat. And visceral fat doesn't sit underneath your skin, it actually hides behind your abs, it wraps around your organs and drives inflammation into your arteries. You can't see it and your doctor won't test for it, but something like a DEXA scan will. And a DEXA scan looks really interesting, but it's quite simple. It's you just laying down for 10 minutes and it shows you exactly how much fat, muscle and bone density you have and where it's distributed, more importantly. So if you've got high visceral fat, your risk of heart disease, stroke and diabetes skyrockets, even if you're quote unquote normal weight. And I'll show you an example of this with one of the clients I've worked with, where we did a DEXA scan and it essentially lays out the composition, the body composition. And by far, it's probably one of the most accurate ways to test for things like body composition, your lean muscle mass, things like visceral fat, and how many calories you need on a day-to-day to survive and maintain your body mass. And what men don't realize is that muscle isn't just for aesthetics, it's a metabolic organ. It regulates your blood sugar, it supports testosterone, it protects you from insulin resistance. So when we do something like a DEXA, we're not just looking for, how muscular someone is or looking at how chiseled they might be, but we're building a foundation for metabolic health and longevity. And that's the first diagnostic. It tells us what kind of structure we're working with and whether your body's protecting or sabotaging your future. And the second test looks a bit deeper into that. We're looking at blood panels. More often than not, when you go and get a blood test done, a standard cholesterol panel, it looks at your total cholesterol, it looks at your HDL and LDL, terms you might be familiar with when you get your cholesterol panel done. And if these look normal, again, they send you straight home. But half of all first heart attacks happen in men with quote unquote normal cholesterol. So what are we missing? Well, just diving into one of them is something called ApoB. ApoB tells you how many particles are carrying cholesterol through your blood. The best way to think about them is that they're delivery trucks, and each truck can bump into your artery wall, causing micro tears. The more trucks, the more damage, the more plaque builds in your arteries, and that leads to a higher risk of things like heart attacks, strokes, etc. So you could have normal cholesterol, but too many ApoB particles means your arteries are being sandpapered every day, slightly and then progressively. And the consensus is there's a causal relationship between ApoB and cardiovascular disease. So when you have a higher ApoB count, you're looking at a higher risk of things like heart attacks and strokes. The third test here completes this picture. So if the DEXA scan shows your structure and the blood work shows your chemistry, the VO2 max shows your capacity, and essentially it just measures how efficiently your body uses oxygen, how strong your heart, lungs and mitochondria really are. The test itself is very simple. You wear a mask, you walk or cycle for 10 minutes, and it measures how much oxygen you take in and how much CO2 you release. And that gives you a VO2 max score. And a number tells you how fit or unfit you really are. And you can get this done typically at places where you get your DEXA scan done also. But unlike genetics, you can change it. Cardio, sprints, resistance work, they all raise your VO2 max. You can literally train your body to live longer. And this is why this metric is non-negotiable. And when we have all this data in place and we understand in what capacity the body is operating in, you can start to make iterative changes to improve your health. This gives you the foundation, the baseline to work with. And that way, you can start improving your health much more accurately and much more precisely based on your body's needs. Once you've got the structure and the chemistry and capacity mapped out, we know exactly where your health really stands. So the question now becomes, how do you now improve those numbers? And that starts with one variable that most men dismiss, because no metric matters if your body never really gets the chance to rebuild. Let's look at it this way. Sleep it's beyond rest. It's not just rest. It's regeneration. It's the only time your brain clears toxins, your hormones rebalance, and your cardiovascular system resets. And cut it short, every system you just measured starts to deteriorate. Slowly, but then eventually catastrophically. Slowly, but then catastrophically. The effects of sleep deprivation go beyond just feeling tired and fatigued. It also increases your chances of cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and even getting type 2 diabetes. So truly, it affects your entire system. And this chart from this meta-analysis of over 1 million people shows it clearly. Your risk of dying from any cause rises sharply when sleep drops below 6 hours. And again, it drifts when it drifts above 9 hours. So this U-shape means this sweet spot is around, let's say, 7 to 8 hours. And I don't think it's necessarily about chasing this perfect number or when it comes to hours of sleep, but you do need to protect that range when it comes to getting a better quality of health. Here's where the problem is. People think that they sleep 7 hours just because they've set the alarm for whatever time and they've gone to bed at a certain time. The truth is, using something like a tracking tool like a Whoop band, which I use personally, it's great because it gives you metrics to actually manage instead of having a subjective view on how many hours of sleep you're getting. And as you can see here, metrics like hours versus needed when it comes to sleep, actual quantifiable metrics. So how close you hit your individual sleep requirement when it comes to things like sleep consistency, whether you're going to bed and waking up within the same 60 minutes, things like sleep efficiency, the percentage of time in bed you're actually asleep, and things like high sleep stress, how much strain your body carries into the night. And going beyond that, we're looking at things like deep sleep and REM sleep. And these are terms you might have been familiar with, but if we deep dive into the sleep architecture, it goes beyond how many hours you've slept, but how well you've slept in those hours. So let's go a bit deeper into the sleep stages. And I want to highlight these two specifically. So SWS stands for slow wave sleep. In other terms, we call it deep sleep. And this is where things like your hormones are being rebalanced, muscle tissue is being repaired, your immunity is being improved as immune cells regenerate. And when it comes to REM sleep, this is where cognitive and emotional recovery happens. That's one way of putting it. It's where neurological adaptations are happening. It's where your mood is essentially being regulated. Things like decision-making, your creativity are all being improved in this phase of sleep. If you miss your slow wave sleep or your deep sleep, your body isn't recovering effectively. And if you miss REM sleep, it's like your brain hasn't recovered. That's why chronic undersleepers feel wired but dull. The nervous system is still firing, but their brain's still operating on a backlog. And just to add a little bit onto that, sleep isn't just about how you feel. It directly affects your other metrics. Poor sleep increases ApoB. It lowers your testosterone and slower recovery of VO2 max after training. And one bad week can affect and distort your blood panel. So you can see how these systems are interrelated. They're connected. So when we build a recovery plan, we're not just talking about sleep hygiene, we're talking about real performance infrastructure. And there are a few things you can do. Having a consistent sleep and awake time, getting 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight first thing in the morning to regulate your circadian rhythm, and limiting the amount of bright light you're exposed to before sleeping. Around 90 minutes is a good mark. And essentially making your bedroom a cave, making it completely dark, pitch black, ready for sleep. And monitoring things like caffeine intake, cutting alcohol before sleep, and weekdays in general to allow you to get into better, more regenerative sleep is very important. So when it comes to fueling for energy and focus, you can't out-train, out-supplement, or out-sleep your bad fueling. Your nutrition determines whether your energy stabilizes or spikes and crashes all day. And most people aren't necessarily undernourished, but they're misfueled. They build meals which are made for convenience and not for their performance. You're scoffing down quick carbs, you're low on protein potentially, high in inflammation. And this is why things like a mid-afternoon crash feels inevitable, just because of the way you've created your meal plans. The goal isn't to count calories necessarily, it's to stabilize blood sugar, maintain your muscle mass, and to reduce inflammation. And that's the foundation of consistent energy, sharper focus, and better metabolic health overall. When you think about building your own nutrition system, you want to account for things like consistency, satiety, and stability. So looking at protein firstly, protein is key. Protein preserves lean muscle mass, it slows digestion, and that stabilizes your blood glucose after meals. So it's not just a macronutrient that we use for muscle building. It's very important for overall metabolic health. And you want to aim for about 30 to 40 grams per meal. And they're not very complicated meals. Here are a few examples, just looking at things like having eggs in the morning. You could pair that with Greek yogurt. You could have salmon in the afternoon. And if you're vegetarian, things like tofu with edamame is also a really good substitute. Protein, it helps with satiety. You feel fuller after having protein, so there's less chance of you binging after. So it's a great way to anchor your meals. And moreover, you want to look at carb management. And we hear so much about carbs, but carbs aren't the enemy. The timing and the type of carbs can be. So choosing things like complex carbs, things like oats, quinoa, sweet potato, they release sugar gradually, and that creates a steady energy curve, so you're not spiking and crashing all day. And you want to reduce your refined carbs. You want to, going for that midday croissant or pastry at the local cafe, that's what's causing your midday crashes. And so those are things that you want to avoid if that's something that you're currently going through. And overall, I'd say prioritizing whole foods is your best bet. 80 to 90% of your food intake should come from foods that don't need labels as such. Ensuring that you're cut out ultra-processed food that deregulates everything when it comes to your hormones, your hunger, and even your gut microbiome. It's less so overcomplicating it. We just need to simplify our food protocols further. And just to end here, you wouldn't fuel a Ferrari with Red Bull and hope it runs smoother, but that's how most people eat under stress. And now that your internal systems are optimized, let's look at how movement and training fits into this bigger picture. And we've been conditioned to think muscle is vanity, but in good truth, it's your body's biological insurance policy. It's ensuring that you live longer for better. It's ensuring that you live better for longer without assistance and with independence. And that's very much the case looking at this graph here. Because the thing is, when strength goes, independence follows. And this study here from American Journal of Medicine shows a direct relationship between muscle mass and mortality. People with lean muscle mass tend to live longer and stay healthier, even when controlling for things like weight. Think of muscle as your battery. The more you have, the longer you can run before your system fails. And the graph says it all. In early life, you maximize your peak. In adult life, you're maintaining it. And in older life, your only job is to minimize that loss. And so when you fall below a certain threshold, the gap between health and disability widens dramatically. And that's why strength training isn't just a choice. It's your strategy to survive and live better into your older years. Very simple plan is just training for strength and not exhaustion. 3 days of training a week is sufficient. It's a great way to grow and maintain muscle mass. Including cardiovascular training as well is really important. Low intensity zone 2 cardio twice a week builds endurance and heart health. So things like brisk walking, cycling, or rowing, whilst you can maintain a conversation, that's how you should think of zone 2. Including that during your week is very important also. And then finally, just building mobility in. Spend 10 minutes a day working on your hips, your shoulders, your spine. And I say that because you want to undo all the hours of sitting that you do all day. And with small movement breaks throughout the day, you can really help with that. So 10 bodyweight squats, push-ups, or even a brisk 5 to 10 minute walk after lunch is very crucial here. So once you've built your 4 foundations, we've looked at your key metrics and diagnostics, we've looked at recovery, we looked at fuel, and now we looked at physique. So now let's add what I call the cherry on top, which is supplementation. And this is to accelerate your progress, essentially. So we've covered the foundation, we've covered the fundamentals. So let's move on to something that we call the precision layer. And I want you to think of supplements as accelerators. That's a good way of phrasing it, and not shortcuts. They only work when they fill real gaps. And you see that with people taking supplements reactively. When people say things like, I'm tired, maybe B12 might be good for me. I want better focus, so I'm going to try a nootropic. And everyone's talking about this new supplement. Maybe that might work for me. But that's how you waste hundreds and hundreds of pounds and dollars of your hard-earned money on things that might not even work for you. Because without the data, when it comes to things like blood work, symptoms, and diagnostics, supplementation becomes expensive guesswork. It's like throwing darts in the dark. That's why a data-first system is key, because a DEXA, like I mentioned before, assesses your structure. You do blood work to assess your chemistry, and recovery data to assess your function. And from there, supplementation becomes prescription-grade personalization. For example, when you have low magnesium, you'll see it reflected in poor sleep and muscle recovery. Low vitamin D, you'll see reduced testosterone and immune resilience. If you have suboptimal omega-3 ratio, you'll potentially see a high inflammation and ApoB levels. Each one connects directly to a measurable outcome. That's why using a supplement provider like Bionic is key here, because using a personalized service provider like them, you're filling in the gaps that are bespoke and relevant to you, rather than just taking supplements for the sake of supplementation. And the figures speak for themselves. I want to highlight that the supplement industry is largely built on people's confusion. It gives you the illusion of control while keeping you blind to what actually matters. Because if they can keep you guessing, it can keep you buying. And when you understand your numbers, that illusion disappears. Stop chasing the latest trend or latest hack when it comes to supplements you hear online. Focus on building real precision. And precision isn't just for your body, it's for your mind. Because your brain is the most metabolically expensive organ you own. And that takes us on to our final part of our framework, which is around cognitive mastery, focusing on neurological health. When your physiology is off, your cognition is the first to suffer. And that's where most people lose their edge. It's not in the gym, but in their decisions, focus, and presence. And that's when you start to see the real decline in health. It's beyond just trying to look fit. You want to stay sharp. You want to stay sharp enough to continue leading, deciding, and living with presence. Because for most individuals performing at a high caliber, decline doesn't start in the body, it starts in the mind first. And you don't lose your edge overnight. It's something that happens gradually. You start to recall things slower, your focus is shorter, and you're more hesitant and weaker in your conviction. And it goes to say, cognitive decline doesn't start with Alzheimer's, it starts with poor recovery, chronic stress, and unmanaged inflammation. The brain is an energy-hungry organ. It consumes around 20% of your total glucose and oxygen. So when your physiology is compromised through poor sleep, nutritional stress, cognition is the first to suffer. And that's why you can feel healthy on the outside but still feel foggy, anxious, or even detached on the inside. And the data is clear. Physical exercise doesn't just build your body. It rewires your brain. Resistance training, like I mentioned before, in cardio, they increase something called BDNF, and that's an acronym. It's short for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that compound is responsible for learning, for focus, and neuroplasticity. So your ability to learn new things. Every rep, every step, every breath of zone 2 cardio that you do is literally telling your brain to continue staying sharp, continue staying present, and stay alive. So movement isn't just movement, it's key for cognitive preservation. And when it comes to things like chronic stress, I'm sure that you understand that chronic stress isn't helpful when it comes to your health. But more specifically, what it does is that it rewires your brain in the opposite direction. It shrinks your prefrontal cortex. That's key for your executive function. It's the region in your brain that governs things like discipline, emotional control, and long-term decision making. So when you're in a constant stress response, your body can't distinguish between running a business or running from a lion, and the result is poor. You make shorter term decisions. You're more reactive and volatile in the way in your disposition, and you operate from a standpoint of survival instead of vision. And there are a few things we can do to remedy this. And there's lots of work and studies being done in the breath workspace. Controlled breathing, specifically sighing, has been shown to lower heart rate, reduce physiological arousal, improve your mood within minutes. So it's like a neurological reset switch. So if your mind is feeling scattered between meetings, making key decisions, and working towards deadlines, a simple 2-minute breathing sequence can bring your system back to center. So 6 deep breaths, 1 minute of slow nasal breathing, or even 2 minutes of reflection or journaling what's on your mind and what's keeping you stressed. It compounds. It's truly a key level of health that's rarely spoken about. It's great for cognitive maintenance. Zooming out, your health isn't just about biomarkers, it's about your presence. It's your ability to sit in a meeting and listen deeply. It's your ability to make decisions with absolute clarity and not from a place of survival and compulsion. And it's to feel grounded in your body and steady in your mind. And that's what longevity really means in practice. It's not just living longer, but staying awake to your own life. We've seen how these 6 systems decide whether you age fast or whether you continue leading strong for decades to come. Key health tests that you need to start off by doing to ensure the rest of this process. So to sum it up, it's looking at the diagnostics that you never run. It's the sleep that you don't just count but optimize. It's the nutrition that stabilizes your energy. It's the strength that maintains your independence for years. The precision inputs that fill real gaps when it comes to your health. And finally, the cognitive control that keeps you conscious through it all. Like I said, in the end, longevity isn't just about adding extra years to your life, but adding awareness to every year you already have. What you've just seen isn't a fitness routine. It goes beyond that. It's a framework for control of your health. It's a structure that will help you reclaim your energy, your precision, and your presence, not just for your business, but for your family, for your legacy. And that's what I do. I work with founders, business operators, and executives to turn health data into real direction, your blood work into clarity, training into resilience, and your health into something that compounds over time. So if this hit home, if you felt the slow decline and you're ready to quantify, rebuild, and lead from strength again, the next step is very simple. Start tracking, start testing, and start leading yourself like you lead everything else in life. Because the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's the energy you lead with, why you're still here.